Hello everyone and welcome to another JavaScript Mastery video. In this video, we are going to be building an awesome real-time chat application. So let's do a short preview. Inside of here, you can type your name and the name of the room you want to join. Once you join, you'll be greeted with this little chat box and some information on the side. Inside of here, you have a box and people who join will all show up here. So currently there is only one person in the chat room, but as more people join, more people will show up here. And of course, you can send messages. Let's close this window up and open two different chat boxes. So inside of here, we have John on one side and Jane on the other. We can join with John and we can join with Jane. Now, as you can see, along with the greeting message that admin had sent, John, welcome to the room, hello, it also said that Jane has joined. So we will receive a notification of sorts for every person that joins. And now we can chat in real time. So if John says something like hello, Jane is immediately going to receive that message. So as you can see, this real-time chat works using Socket.io. Socket.io is used for real-time data transfer, and the data we'll be transferring are messages. There are also some additions to this chat. What would a chat box be in 2019 without emojis? So as you can see, if you type any emojis, they immediately get transferred to their corresponding emojis. So you just need to type your characters and they will get transferred to emojis. Also, when you spam a bit, so let's do spam 1, spam 2, spam 3, as you can see, chatbox immediately scrolls to the bottom. That's for user friendliness, because every time that you receive new messages, you would need to manually swap to the bottom. So if we spam a bit more and get to the top, you can also see that we have this little button right here, and if you click it, it will get immediately to the bottom of the chat box. So these are some functionalities of the chat box, but the main focus is the real-time data transfer that we'll be doing with Node.js, Socket.io, and React. So React is going to be used on the client side, and the Node.js is going to be used on the backend. Along with these two, we'll be using Socket.io to make this happen. So let's dive right into the code and let's start writing it. There are some more important things that I forgot to mention. This video is for anyone wanting to learn and advance in React and Node by creating a real project from scratch. This project will include project structure, lifecycle methods using hooks, front-end and back-end connectivity, Socket.io, and much more. This video is suitable for everyone who has some familiarity with React and for those that already know quite a bit but want to improve their knowledge. And one of the great additions of this video is that we are going to do a full deployment of both backend and client side, so you can use this chat application online and share it with your friends to actually test it or just put it on your portfolio. So let's get started. First, we need to create an empty directory. I'm currently in an empty directory called Chat Application. Once you create it, feel free to open it in your code editor of choice. Mine is Visual Studio Code. And once we have that ready, we can create two new directories. You can create these directories by just manually adding them right here, or you can use command line. If you're on Visual Studio Code, you have built-in terminal, so you can open it inside of View and then Terminal, or just use this keyboard shortcut. We can do it using terminal since it is going to be a bit faster. Make dir client. This is for our React code. We can cd into client and we can run create React app and /. This will create it inside of the client directory. While we wait until that installs, we can click on this plus icon right here and open another terminal. Or we can rather click this and open it on the side. So inside of here, we are going to cd, so we get back into the main directory, so that is this one right here. And we can create a server directory. So we are going to make dir server, and we are going to cd into server. Now that we are in here, we are going to initialize our package.json. So we can type npm init/y. And this is going to initialize our package.json. And then we can install all the necessary dependencies by typing npm install --save. And we are going to be using course later in production, nodemon if you don't have it installed already, express, and socket.io. So type that in, and while that installs, we can install all the necessary dependencies for the client side. So inside of the client, type npm install --save, and in here we have quite a few. So react-router, socket.io-client, react scroll to bottom, react emoji, and query string. Type that out, and okay. So we can now clear our console right here and wait until this installs. Now we can see that inside of the client we have a typical create React app boilerplate, and inside of the server we just have the node modules and package.json. In here we just need to add a start script, so we are going to type start, and it is going to be nodemon, so dependency we just installed, index.js. Basically, this is going to run our server continuously. We do not need to run node index.js every time. This is going to run it all the time and restart it for us. Okay, now that that is out of the way, we are going to delete all the unnecessary boilerplate code that Create React app provided us with. So navigate to the client directory right here and delete this source. So inside of here we have a lot of stuff, but we are going to be building it from the scratch. Okay, so we can create our new source directory, and inside of here we are going to have two files. One is going to be index.js and the second one is going to be app.js. Okay, so inside of the index.js file we are going to initiate our React application. So we can import React from React. We can also import React DOM from React-DOM, and we can import app, which doesn't exist yet. We are going to create it from that/app. Okay, and we need to actually target our root element inside of the HTML. So we're going to do React DOM.render, pass in that app component, and we're going to do document.query selector, and we are going to target that root right here. Okay, that's basically it. Many people just copy this code out, so this is just a basic boilerplate code that you need for every single React application. If you are more of a React beginner, I'll explain it for just a second. Inside of this public directory, you have an index.html file. Ignore all of these comments and you'll see that the only thing in the body is the root. So basically, React is going to import or inject all of the code that we write inside of this single div. And we are actually targeting that div inside of here. So we're saying everything that we create in React is going to be inside of this app and put it inside of the root. So that's basically it. Okay, now that we are ready with the index.js app, let's move on to our app.js to set up our initial project structure. So we are going to import React from React as we do with any React component. But we are also going to import some things from React Router. So React Router wasn't really necessary for this application. We could have used Redux or deep props sharing. But for the simplicity of this application, I just decided to pass the props as query parameters, just to simplify things on this end so we can focus more on the socket.io side of things. So inside of here, we are going to have browser router as router, and we are also going to have router and route. Sorry, without this router right here, it is the thing we assigned before. So we are going to import that from React router DOM. Okay, there is a mistake on my end. We installed React Router instead of React Router DOM, so we can do it right here. We are going to type npm install -- save and pass in React Router DOM and install that so we can use it. There were some changes regarding React Router and React Router DOM and all the peer dependencies, but it looks like it's now React Router DOM. Okay, so with that out of the way, while it is installing, we can create our app.js component. So it is going to be a simple arrow-based component. So we can type const app is equal to an arrow function that is going to be equal to return. Since we only have return inside of this, we can only type our parentheses. We don't even need our curly braces. So inside of here, we are going to return. First, there is a component called router, which we declared up above, and it has two routes. On the first one, we have path that is equal to root, which is basically just a root path. We have exact, and we need to pass in a component that we want to render on that path, and it is going to be join. And then we have the second route, which is going to be /chat, and it is not going to be exact path since we are going to pass our properties. And inside of here, we are going to render chat. So let me talk a bit about what is happening right here. So when the user first comes on the page, he is going to be greeted with our join component. Inside of here, he is going to pass his data in the login form, and through query strings, which you will see later, we are going to pass that data through to the chat. Once we have the data, we are going to render the chat component. So with that out of the way, we can export default app. And now we need to create these two components just so our app doesn't break. So we are going to import app from that /. And now we need to create those two components just so our app doesn't break when we launch it. So we are going to type import join from that / components /join, and also we are going to import our chat right here in the same fashion. So right here, let's create our folder called components, if I spelled it correctly, and let's create those two files called join.js and chat.js. Okay, inside of here, we need to have our basic boilerplate for every component. So we're going to type import React from React. Now we can create our chat component. So const chat is equal to an arrow function, and we are simply going to return an h1, which is going to say chat, just so we know that it is indeed a chat component being rendered. And we are going to export default chat. Okay, we can copy this and paste it inside of the join and just change this chat to join. Now, if we are correctly importing all these things inside of the app, we can actually run it. So run npm start to run the React application, and it should open in the browser on the localhost 3000. Okay, now inside of here, you can see that we have our join component being rendered on the root path of our project. And if we type chat and spell it correctly, you can see that our chat component is being rendered. And now we are going to set up our server. So now that we have just this basic client up and running, we can go into the server and create our index.js file. And let's create that server and let's make it running. So inside of here, we can first require all the necessary dependencies. So we're going to be using express. So const express is equal to require express. We still have no import statements like in React because we are in the node and we need to do imports like this using require. Also, we are going to be using socket.io. So it's socket.io is equal to require socket.io. And we also need to require a built-in node module called HTTP. So HTTP is equal to require HTTP. Okay, now we need to set up the socket.io. And to do that properly, we do not need to only run our application like we are used to. So const app is equal to express, and then run it like this. And then app.listen or app.get. We'll be doing something more differently. You can find all the details in the official socket.io documentation right here. So if you go under the socket.io on the web and go under documentation, inside of here, if you search for Node, you should find, yeah, here it is, using with Node HTTP server. So inside of here, you can see a basic demonstration of just a basic server app.js. So you can go through all of the documentation. It is always a good idea to understand in depth the software you're working with. So in this case, it is socket.io. It is used for majority of the data transfer in this application. So inside of here, if we want to see something more about it, you can see that it can be used to do real-time analytics, instant messaging and chat. So you can see that just few lines of code, we can initialize our chat application, but ours is going to be a bit more complex. Basically, with socket.io, you can do anything that is real time. So if you want to do something real time, you need to use sockets, not HTTP requests, because HTTP requests are slow. They're good for serving websites, but you need to use WebSockets, which socket.io is using, to actually show something in the real time. So let's get back to our Node.js application and let's initialize our server so we can properly set up our socket.io. Just under the app, we can run const server is equal to http.create server, and we need to pass in that app that we initialized from Express right here. And just under, we can create IO, which is going to be an instance of the socket IO. So socket IO, and we pass in the server. As you can see here, this is just a basic rundown to make this socket.io server working. Now we have this socket.io instance that can do a lot of stuff. But first, let's make our server running. So we're going to type server.listen, and then we need to specify our port. So we can do that right here. So const port is going to be equal to process.env.port, or we can run it on 5000. So basically we can just run it on 5000, but later for deployment, our server is going to require a specific port, and it is going to be inside of the process.env.port. So we do this to make it correct for longer distance, so we don't need to change it. First parameter to this server.listen is our port, so we are going to pass that in. And the second is a callback function in which we can simply console.log, and we can put our backticks server has started on port, and then we can specify the port using our $sign and then curly braces syntax to actually pass in a real variable. This should be enough so we can run the server and actually see our server running. So if we go inside of the terminal that is inside of the server, I have both open on the side. This is client side and this is server side. We can simply, as we specified here, run npm start, and it is going to run our nodemon of the index.js file. So inside of here, you can see that this command has been run and that the server has started on port 5000. So now we need to actually do the real-time messaging. Since we are already on the backend, we can start with that. First, we can create our router. So we are going to have a router, really simple router, and we are going to create it as a new component right here. So we're going to have router.js. It is just typical for all Express applications. Inside of here, we are just going to require Express, and we are going to require router by typing express.router and then immediately calling it with a capital R. In here, we can create our GET request to a root route. So it is going to be just slash, and we have typical request and response. And inside of here, we are simply going to send our message server is up and running. This is just it, just so we can see if we open it on the localhost 5000 that our server is actually running. And after we created our router and our routes, we are simply going to export it. So module.exports is equal to router. Now that we exported it, inside of the index.js file, we can actually not import, but require it. So const router is equal to require router from /router, because that's where it is based. And now we can actually call it as a middleware. So app.use and pass in our router. Okay, with that out of the way, everything should be working, and we can actually try it inside of here. So if we type localhost 5000, you can actually see that we get our message server is up and running. Our server is up, but now we need to integrate our socket.io. So as you can see here, we have this instance of IO that we created, but we are not doing anything with it. So let's start with that. IO on the backend, so it is not socket.io/client that we have on the frontend, has some methods. So if we go back right here and open our socket.io documentation, under learn and then documentation, or simply maybe under get started, you can see that we have io.on. It is a method, a built-in keyword connection. And this is going to run when we have a client connection on our IO instance. And with that, we also have, if we can see it right here, a special built-in disconnect. So we are going to be using both of these methods to actually register clients joining and clients leaving from our real-time chat application. So now we can get back to our application and actually start writing socket.io code. So as we saw, we have a special io.on, and then we need to pass connect or connection. We can pass in connection. And inside of here, we have a callback function that is going to be run. Inside of here, we get a socket. So this is going to be a socket that is going to be connected as a client-side socket. So right here, for the moment, we can simply console.log we have a new connection, just so we know when the new connection actually occurs. We can even add some exclamation marks right here so we notice it. While we are here, we can also implement our disconnect. So inside of here, inside of the io.on, all code is going to be run inside of this function, because we are actually managing this specific socket that just connected. We are going to have a socket.on. So this time it is not a io.on, but socket.on, which is just a specific socket that just joined. We are going to have a specific function, as we said, which is disconnect. And inside of here, we are not going to have any parameters right here, as we did with socket, because that user had just left. And inside of here, we can console.log user had left. Okay, now with those two basic functions done, when we create our basic client side, we are actually going to receive real-time connection and disconnection console.logs right here in the console of our Visual Studio Code. So now we can get back to our client-side code and implement that there. Now we can start creating the frontend for our join component, because when the user joins, a connection request is going to be fired up, and when the user leaves, a disconnection event is going to be fired up. So let's start. In this component, we are going to be using React hooks. If you haven't used hooks before, hooks are basically a new addition to React function-based components. Before, function-based components were just dummy components, but now, with addition of hooks, you can actually use state and lifecycle methods inside of them. So now you can convert basically 90% of class-based components to function-based components, and they actually look much cleaner with less code and improved readability. If you haven't used hooks before, I strongly encourage you to watch my hooks video on the channel. I'm going to link it right now, somewhere on the screen or in the description. This video is going to have some heavy use of hooks. Inside our chat component, we will be using a complex lifecycle methods using hooks. So if you have some free time and want to learn something new, feel free to go watch that hooks video right now. But if you do not have time and just want to build this chat application, feel free to stay. And we are going to explain everything inside of here also. So we are going to first import use state. This is a hook for using state inside of the function-based components. And we are also going to import link from React router DOM. This link is used to actually link to our chat /chat path. Okay, now inside of here, you declare hooks inside of the function-based components, nowhere else. You declare hooks like this: const and then an array. First parameter is a variable, so name for example, and the second is a setter function, so set name, and it is equal to the use state. And inside of here you pass the initial value that this variable is going to have, and in our case it is going to be an empty string. So now we can use our name state. We have a function to set this name state, and we are passing it an empty string as a initial value for our name state. Inside of here we are also going to have one similar state like this. It is going to be a room. So we are going to have room, and we are going to have set room setter function. Just like that. It is also going to be initialized as an empty string. Only thing left to do in this component is to create our JSX or actual presentational part for our join component. In this video, we will not be using Bootstrap or any other CSS preprocessors or frameworks in that case. So we're just going to write pure CSS, and because I do not want to bother you with writing a lot of CSS to style this, because I know that that is not the reason you are here, I'm going to leave a link down below to the GitHub project of this page where you can actually copy all of the CSS files. I'm going to copy them into this video. But if you have time and if you're willing to actually create styles for yourself, feel free to pause this video and then write the styles for yourself. Also, while you're copying styles from my GitHub directory of this project, feel free to leave a star on the top right of the project on GitHub. So now let's actually start creating it. First, we are going to have a div of class name join outer container. And inside of here, we are also going to have an inner div, which is going to be equal to join inner container. So inside of here, we are going to have an h1, which is going to have a class name of heading. And if you're not familiar with React and you used HTML before, you use class, but since we are writing JSX and not actual HTML, we need to use class name for classes. Okay, now this is simply going to say join, and inside of here we are going to have two divs, and both of them are going to have an input. So inside of here we are going to create an input. Each one is going to have a placeholder, and also each one is going to have a class name that is equal to join input, and each one is going to have a type of text. And each input is going to have on change handler, which we are going to write later, so we explain it in more detail. Now we need to close our input component just like this. And just below, we are going to have our link that we imported on the top. If you wonder how I wrote in multiple lines like this, you basically just put your cursor and click Alt on Mac. I'm not sure about Windows. And then you have multiple active cursors available right here. Okay, it's a little pro tip for if you're handling similar data or simply want to delete a lot of stuff at once. Inside of the link, we are going to have a button. This button is going to have a class name of button, and it is going to have this button is going to have a class name of button, and it is going to have type of submit. Inside of here, we'll just say sign in. Okay, for the placeholders, we are going to have to type name, and this one is going to be room. Class name is join input, but this second input is going to have MT20, which is basically margin top 20, just so we can divide it from this one. And this button is going to have margin 20 also, margin top 20, just so we can divide it from the inputs. Okay, now we can focus on our on-change handlers. Basically, this is where the logic of this component happens. So basically, we are going to have an arrow function, and inside of here, we are going to have event. So basically, when user types something in this input, event is going to occur. And we can simply get data from this event with event.target.value. So event.target.value basically holds our data. And what are we going to do with the data? Since this is a name input, we are simply going to set this the output of this input into our name variable. So we are going to call set name, and we are just going to pass event.target.value. That's basically it. And the same thing is happening for the bottom component. The only thing we have to change is our set name. We need to change it to set room. As you can see here, we do not have this .set state or this .name or stuff like that. With using hooks, you just have simple functions and simple variable names as state properties. Okay, now that is ready, we need to actually do something with this name and input, because as you can see, they're not being used right now. And this is where our link comes to play. So as I said, we are not going to be transferring data through props or using Redux for this case. We are just going to be using query strings. So we are going to pass data as an URL. You're going to see how to do that right now. So link needs to have a to property. So our link is going to lead, and now we put curly braces because it is going to be dynamic, to /chat, because that's where our chat component is. But before that, we need to pass in some parameters. And you pass parameters or query string, and you pass parameters in the URL by using question mark. And now you can specify those params. So first one is name, which is going to be equal to name variable right here, set from our input. And the second, you divide it by typing and signed, is going to be room, which is going to be equal to, you guessed it, room. Okay, with this, we'll be able to read the name and the room from our chat component to actually see the data we got in here. Another thing we need to do is we need to prevent user to click this button or this link to be transferred to chat application if he hasn't specified the name or the room, because that would break our application. So we can do on click, and we also have a callback function right here which has event, and we can simply do it like this. If no name or no room, then we can use ternary operator to actually call event.prevent default. This is going to prevent button click of this link. And secondly, we can add null right here. And if it has room and name, we are simply going to do nothing, because we want just to be transferred to our chat with all the specified parameters. That is it for this application. And the way we are going to do this CSS is that we are going to import it from right here. So It is a nice way, a nice project structure for every component to have a specific folder. So we're going to put this chat application inside of the chat folder, and we are going to create a chat.css file inside of the folder also. So inside of here will be all the styles for our specific component. So we can also have one specific index.css file, but if you have like 10 or 20 components or 100, this file would get like 1,000 or more lines, and it is not readable. You cannot find the property you're looking for inside of it. So it is a better practice to actually put a specific CSS file for every component. Now that we created this file or folder for our chat component, we can actually do it for our join component. So we're going to have join, pass this join component in, and create join.css file. Now we can actually import it on the top of our component. So import /join.css, don't forget that. And now all the styles from this CSS file are going to be applied to this component and to our project. As I mentioned, you do not need to worry, you don't need to write them all by hand right now, so we are not going to waste time. You can just go under the link below and simply copy them from my GitHub repository. The project structure is going to be the same, so you can just go under join and join.css and copy all of the files right there. Then we paste them right here. As you can see, these are just basic styles, some displays, width, border radius, paddings, and stuff like that. If you want to, and if you want to practice on your CSS, you can just basically write it all by yourself, even change the styles, it doesn't really matter. But for the simplicity of this video, we are simply going to copy and paste them right here. Okay, now if we actually open our console, we can see that we have some problems, and that is because we changed the file structure of our join and chat components. So we now need to import them actually from our join/join and chat/chat, because we need to dive into the components directory and then one level deeper into the chat or join and then fetch the component. So we're doing that right here. Now, if we go back into our browser, we can actually see our join component. As you can see here, our join component has been done. And in here, we have an input and a room, so which is just another input. Once we click here, we are going to be transferred to our chat application right here, which is actually rendering our chat component. And if you notice right here, inside of our URL, we have two parameters. In here is the name, and in here is the room. As I said, this is just for the simplicity purposes. We could have done this with passing props or with Redux, but I did not want to implement this into this application for the simplicity's sake. Okay, now if we get back, we can actually start writing our chat application and actually initiate requests for connection and disconnection of our socket.io instance. Inside of this chat file is where all the most important socket.io logic is going to be stored. So let's get right to it. Inside of here, we are also going to be using hooks, so we can import use state and use effect, which is basically for lifecycle methods inside of hooks. We can also import query string, so import query string from query-string. This module is going to help us with retrieving data from the URL as we saw before. And we can actually import IO from socket.io-client. So first thing inside of here are going to be use effect calls. So what is use effect? Use effect is a hook that lets you use lifecycle methods or side effects in function component. You can see that it is specified as first an arrow function right here, and inside of here you do something and it happens on component did mount, so on the first render, on component did update, so on the every other render, and you can also specify the component did unmount, but I think we can see that right here. So as you can see, this is the equivalent to use effect hook on the class-based components. So we need to do a lot of duplicate code, but using use effect hook, we can do something simply like this. Inside of here is just a simple example, but we also need to use cleanup because we need to do something when the user actually disconnects. So as you can see, this is the equivalent to the class-based components. We need to use component will unmount, but using our hooks, we can simply do something like this. We can return a function, and this is going to be acting as our cleanup or as our component did unmount lifecycle method. With that out of the way, if you want to understand more about hooks, you can simply watch the video I did. So right here we can specify our first use effect call. It is going to be use effect, and it needs to have an arrow function. So inside of here we will put an arrow function. So first, inside of here, it is going to run when the component renders. So the first thing we need to do in our chat application or chat component is to retrieve the data that users have entered while joining. So we can do that in this fashion. So we are going to have a constant call data, and we are going to fetch it from query string.parse, and in here we are going to pass in our location.search. Location actually comes from React router, and it gives us a prop called location. So we can actually use this location right here. With this, we basically get a URL back. So if we console.log our data, and we can actually console.log our location.search, so we can see what we are getting back. So if we do this and go back inside of our browser, we can actually open our inspect element and console to see what data are we getting back. So we are going to put this down below, and you can see that we are getting back right here the second part. So location.search is not giving us a full URL, but only the parameters. And what this query string module right here that we imported is going to do for us is going to return an object, and is simply going to specify name is equal to JavaScript mastery and room is equal to room, as you can see here right here. We can actually destructure that and automatically take in room, or basically name, and room from this. And now we can simply console.log name and room, and we will see that we have all the data right here, because they are indeed specified right here in the URL of our chat. Since we are going to be using both name and room in this component also, and in all other components, we are also going to specify them as state right here. So we can just copy these two statements right here and paste them on top of our chat component. And we can simply call set name and pass in name, and set room and pass in the room. Okay, like this. Now we have name and room inside of our chat component. And now we need to actually make use of our IO right here. So we need to create a variable that is going to be stored outside of our component. So we can create an empty variable called socket. We just define it right here. It does not have any data right now, but we are soon going to pass data inside of it. Now that we have this variable, inside, when we get actually our first connection, we are going to set that socket equal to IO, which is coming from right here. And we need to pass an endpoint to the server. And our endpoint is located at localhost 5000 right here. And it needs to be in a string. So as you can see right here, we can even store this in a new variable, because when you have just empty strings, you can always store them in a separate variable. It is a much cleaner way of storing just simple string variables. And now we can pass in this endpoint right here. Simple as that. What we can do now is actually console.log our socket to actually see what data are we dealing with. If we go back to our browser and we refresh, you can see right here that we have an instance of a socket. It has its own ID and many other properties. If we get back and open our console, we can see that we actually are making requests to our server, which is great. Now, all of these requests are happening 2 times, which is not good. And that is exactly why we need to specify when our useEffect function is being called. you do that by passing an array to use effect like this. And it says right here, if present, effect will only activate if the values in the list change. The values we are going to pass in are endpoint and location.search. So only if these two values change, we need to re-render our use effect. Now, if we clean this, right now you can see that we are getting only one instance of socket. And if we get back, you can see that we have only one new connection. That's it. So no more unnecessary side effects happening. This is the beauty of use effect hook. So now we can actually, from the front end, emit different events using this specific instance of a socket. And you can do that by typing socket.emit. This is basically another socket method, and we are going to explore it into the documentation right now. So inside of the socket documentation, if you type Command F on Mac or Control F and search for emitting events, you can see right here that on the front end, this is pure HTML right now, using scripts for JavaScript. We are using React, so none of that is necessary. But the important thing is that you can notice that we can emit events from our client-side socket. So you run it like socket.emit, and then this is and then you pass in a string that the backend is going to recognize. This can be anything. So this can be chat message, this can be any string you want. And then something is going to happen on the backend when it recognizes this emitted event. Another great thing with emit is that you can actually pass in some data. So as you can see right here, we are emitting some event, which is just a voluntary name, but it is passing an object with one property as its payload. We can receive this data on the backend, and that's exactly what we are going to do right now. So inside of here, our event is going to be called join. So on join, we are going to do something, and we are going to pass an object with our name and our room. This is ES6 syntax. If you're not familiar with it, this is the same as typing name is equal to name and room is equal to room. But now we do not need that because the names are actually equal, and this is actually our name and this is our room that we specified right here. And now we can actually go to our server side. We can close this terminals and actually close all of these files right here and go to our server index.js, and now we can actually receive this event and see what happens when it is being emitted. So inside of here, we can use this socket right here, which is just a specific client instance of a socket. And inside of this console, maybe we can leave it for now, we can type socket.on. And inside of here, we can specify the event we specified. So it is the same exact string, join. So socket.on join, and then we have a callback function, something that is going to happen on join. Inside of here, we have our parameters. So it is an object with name and room. And now we get access on the backend with name and room. So we're going to console out name and room. And simply that's it for now. If we open our terminal again and we clean this out a bit, go back to our browser and our application, and if you refresh that right now, go back to our application, you can see right here that we have a new connection and the name is JS Mastery and room is equal to room. That's amazing. So we are actually getting the data. Another thing that you can do with socket.on and socket.emit is actually pass in a callback. So as a second parameter to our callback function, which is actually right here, we can pass in a callback. And we can make use of that callback inside of this socket.on event. So we can call it right here. And what this is going to do is that we can actually trigger some response immediately after this socket.on event is being emitted, and then we requested it right here. So what you can do with callback is actually do some error handling. So for example, let's say that we have some error. So const error is going to be equal to true. Later we will have some true error handling, but for now let's just say we have an error. And then we are going to have an if statement, And if there is an error, which for now there surely is because it is true, simply we're going to do a callback, and inside of it we are going to pass in our error. So we are simply going to type error is equal to let's say a string of error. Simple as that. And now on the client side, if we open this right here, chat application, we can even open it on this side and close this so we can see more clearly. And now we have access to this callback right here as a third parameter to our emit function. So inside of here, this is going to be an arrow function right here. And this is going to be executed when this callback is called. As parameters to this callback function, we get everything that we specified in here. So in here, if we type error, as we did right here, we can destructure it from this object. And if we console.log, or even we can alert this error right here. And now if we go back to the browser and refresh, you can actually see that we do get an alert with a message error. And if we go back and if we comment this out on the server side, and we go back and refresh, you can see that we do get nothing. So this is a great way of error handling or simply calling any callbacks you want to provide after the specific event has been emitted. So user has joined, we pass some data, we do some logic right here on the backend, and then we can pass in a callback what we want to happen after this event has emitted. And this is actually this function right here, this callback function that socket.io has provided us with. Okay, so for now we can remove this callback right here, and we will actually implement error handling later. We can also remove this right here, not to make any errors right here, but we will have this arrow function ready if it needs to be used. To actually finish our first use effect hook, we need to actually provide that return statement or return function as I mentioned before. So to actually finish our use effect hook, we need to implement a return statement. This is used for unmounting. So this is used for disconnect effects. What we want to do now is provide a function. This is simply how use effect hook works. And inside the function, we want to emit a disconnect event. So if you remember, inside of here on the backend side, we had a disconnect, and this is a basic disconnect event. Inside of here, we can actually emit that event called disconnect, the same as it is called right here. The naming must be the same, and we can simply emit that event when this happens. And this is going to be happening on unmounting of the component, so we are leaving the chat. And the last thing we need to do is actually called socket.off. It will actually turn this this one instance of a client socket right here. So one chat person, it is going to turn it off, so we do not have to bother with it anymore. With this, our first use effect hook is done. And now we have our basic setup for users joining and users disconnecting completed. As we saw before, now we indeed are getting the data about the name and the room on the backend. So what I want you to do is close both of these windows for now and create a new file in the server. So we are not going to touch client for now, but in the server side, create a folder called users.js. Inside of this file, we are going to create helper functions that are going to help us manage users and manage users joining in, signing out, removing users, getting users, adding users, everything that has to do with users, even keeping track of what users are in what rooms. So right now, let's add those helper functions that we are going to use in the index.js. So right now, first, let's set up an array of users. So users are going to be an empty array at the beginning. But now let's specify what helper functions do we really need. So we need a function that is going to add user. So it is going to be add user, and it is going to be equal to an arrow function. Later, we need to remove user. So const remove user is also going to be equal to an arrow function. And afterwards, we also need to get user. And after we get users, we also need to get users in a specific room. So get users in room is our fourth and final helper function. Okay, now we can collapse all of this and start creating one by one. First, in add user, that function is going to take 3 parameters. So we can destructure them properly right here. First one is going to be an ID of a user or of a socket instance. So first thing we need to do is we need to somehow change the name and the room that user enters. So for example, if user enters JavaScript mastery, we want to change that to be JavaScript mastery, all lowercase and all as one word. So first we want to take this name right here, and then we want to trim it. As you can see right here, trimming removes the leading and trailing white spaces and line terminator characters from a string, so remove all white space. And then we want to actually put it to lowercase, so to lowercase. And we want to do the same exact thing to the room, so we know exactly what string data are we dealing with. After that, we're going to check if there is an existing user with the username that the second user is trying to log in with. So we are going to do const existing user is equal to users that find. So we are going through this array and we are looking for users, and we are trying to find if there is already an existing user with this name that the new user is trying to sign up with. So now we can just take the user out, and if user.room is equal to room, and if user.name is equal to name. This means that new user is trying to sign up for the same room with the same username, and this is forbidden. So we can simply add an if check, if existing user, then we can return an error that is going to say username is taken. Simple as that. And now if there is an existing username, our user cannot sign in, and we will simply exit this function because this return statement is going to throw it out of this function and new user is not going to be created. But if there is no existing user, we can simply create a new user. So const user is going to be equal to an object of an ID, name, and the room, and we can simply push this user to our new array of users. Now there will be a user there, and we can simply return that user, so we know exactly which user was pushed. Okay, now to our second function is remove user. So in remove user, we are going to have only one parameter, and that is ID. So we are going to try to index or try to find that user with that specific ID. So we're going to create a constant called index, and we are going to run users that find index. So in here, we are going to try to index or find our user. So we're going to try to type const index is equal to users that find index, and then in here we have user. And in here, if the user.id is equal to the specified ID, so that means that there is a user with that ID. So if there is a user of that index, so we can simply type if index not equal to -1, we can simply return users that splice from that specific index, one field and 0 right here, because that is going to return our spliced user. And this is going to remove that user from our users array. Simple as that for the remove user function. Now we need to get user. So we need to see if there is a user. We can do this on one line. So we can simply run, and again, we are going to have ID right here. And we can simply run users that find, and then in here we are going to have user again. And if user.id is equal to ID, that means that user exists, and we are simply going to return it right here. And now for getting all users in the room, we are going to have to use the filter function, and we need basically a room because we want all users from that specific room. Users.filter, in here we have user again, If user.room is equal to room, that's basically it. Return all the users from that room. Now we have these 4 functions right here, and we want to export them. So module.exports is equal to add user, remove user, and get user, and also get users in room. There should be a comma right here. And after this, we are fully set to use this file or use these helper functions inside of our index.js file. So we can properly manage all the users that there are on all specific sockets. So right here, if we go into our index.js, now we can make use of these functions by simply importing them right here. So we are going to just underneath here, type const, and then curly braces, add user, remove user, get user, and get users in room. Okay, from that slash users. Simple as that. There seems to be an error right here. Oh yeah, I cannot import it. I need to require it. Just like this. Okay, simple as that. Now we have access to these functions right here. So as I mentioned, we have name and room right here. But now let's actually do something other than console.logging.name and the room. So on the join, we are actually going to remove this console.logger here, put this on top. We are going to destructure properties that come from this function, and we have user and error. And this is going to be equal to add user. So why do we have error and user? Basically, add user function can return only 2 things: an object that has an error property or an object that has a user property. So if we get an error, we can simply do something with it, or if we get user, even better. So what do we need to pass to add user function? Basically, add user receives ID, name, and room. So let's actually see what we can do with that. So we need to put everything in an object to destructure it. ID, we don't have it right here, but it is actually going to be the ID I showed you on a specific instance of a socket. So right here we are going to type socket.id. Okay, name and the room. We are going to pass all of this. And right now we are going to type if error. We are simply going to return callback error. So right now we are actually doing something with this callback function, and this error handling is dynamically coming, or rather error message is dynamically coming based on the specific error. So if there is an existing user with that username, we'll just output the error as username is taken. Easy as that. If there is an error, we will automatically get kicked out of this function because there is a return statement right here. And if there are no errors, we are simply going to call another built-in socket method, which is called join. Join simply, as you can see right here, joins a user in a room. Easy as that. And in here, we pass the name of the room, and it is right now stored in the user.room. We are getting it out of the user. That's great. And now, when user is finally inside of the room, we can handle the fun stuff: messaging, events, and messages. Firstly, let's focus on the admin generated messages. So this will be system messages when someone joins, when users leave, and stuff like that. So for the beginning, we simply need to emit a new event. So socket.emit, and we can call it message. As you saw before, we can also specify the payload of this event, and we are simply going to say user is equal to admin, and text is equal to whatever we want. So we can specify the text in this message will be equal to, let's put it as a template literal string, and we can say user.name, welcome to the room, and then we can specify user.room. This is simple welcome message for any user. Simple as that. Okay, but now we are diving into new features of socket.io. There is a new method called socket.broadcast. And basically what broadcast does it is going to send a message to everyone besides that specific user. So inside of here, we can send that message to a specific room. So when you're dealing only with rooms, not all chats, you need to specify a room. So user.room, and then that emit, and we are going to simply emit a message, the same event we have before. And this time the payload is going to be the following. So we have an object right here. User is also going to be admin, and the payload this time is going to be the following: templated literal again, and user that name has joined. That's basically it. So the first line right here is telling the user that he is welcome to the chat, and the second line right here is letting everybody else besides that user know that that user had joined. That's basically it for this specific join function. We can also add a callback down here so that the callback at the front end, if you remember, gets called every time. But if there are no errors, we will simply not going to pass the error. So it is going to run, but the if statement on the front end is not going to be run because there are no errors. But now let's get on to creating events for user generated messages. So we can type socket.on, and we can call this one send message. The admin generated messages are going to be simply message, and the user generated one are going to be send message. On this line right here, we actually emitted event from the backend to the frontend. But on here, right here, we want to expect the event on the backend. So we'll be waiting on send message, and the emitting part is actually going to be happening on the frontend. So just after we write this, we are going to transfer to frontend to actually emit those events. So as we remember, or as we can see right here, the on function takes in two parameters. First one is a keyword on a string, and the second one is an arrow function. So we are going to type here, and this is a callback that is going to be run after the event is emitted. Inside of the event, we can actually take in the data. So right here, we are going to have a message, and we are going to have a callback. And in here, we are going to get user who sent that message. So const user is equal to get user, and we need to specify the ID. We have access to this socket from up above right here, and that is the specific client instance. So that is a specific user, and we have his ID. So right now, what we are going to do is pretty simple. So we are going to type io.to because we need to specify the room name, and room name is simply room in which that user is currently, and we are going to emit that event. So we are going to emit message, and as a payload, we will forward like this: user is equal to user.name. And secondly, we are going to have a text of some sorts, and that text is going to be equal to message. So that message is coming from the front end, and we are going to look at that right now. And afterwards, you always want to call this callback right here, so we can actually do something after the message is sent on the front end. Okay, now that this is ready, we can actually get on the front end and see what data are we getting, and we can actually write emitters and listeners for this on the client side. So now let's keep this open on the side, and let's open chat.js on the front end. So right here, we only have emitter for the join. We don't have the message or send message. So now we need to do something with that. So right here, we are going to create a second useEffect function. So with hooks, you can use as many useState as you can see right here, or useEffect hooks as you want. The second one is going to be for handling messages. So we're going to type useEffect as we did before. We are going to pass in a function. And right now we are going to listen, as I mentioned before, for messages. So socket.on, and we specified message. After that, we get a callback function. So if we take a look right here, message is sending right here a payload of a user and a text. So that is going to be our message right here. And now we need to do something with that message. Basically, how we are going to keep track of all messages is going to be with the state. So we are going to have a state called messages. And inside of the messages, we are actually going to have an array that is going to store all messages. So right here, it is going to be an empty array. And then we need to somehow specify every single message. So we are also going to have state for set message and message, which is simply going to be an empty string. So right here, we can actually push these messages to our messages array. So we are simply going to type set messages. And since we cannot mutate state, we are simply going to spread all other messages and add one message on it. That's basically it. So right now, this is adding every new message sent by admin or anyone else to our messages array. And right here, as you can remember, we have an array and we want to run this use effect only when messages array changes. That's basically it. So right now, we need to create a function for sending messages, and also we need to add our JSX right here. This chat component is actually going to be a main component where everything is going to be, and it is going to have a lot of code. Because of that, in the final version, there are a lot of important components into this. So we are going to create separate components and then import them all into this one component. But for now, let's just try to create a input field that is going to send messages so that we can actually see that messages are being sent, and then we can later style it easily or add more specific like chat boxes, elements, and stuff like that. So right now we are going to simply create a outer layout. We are going to have a div, and inside of that div we are going to have another div. Let me see. Okay, so first div is going to have a class name of outer container, and the second one is going to have a class name of container. And inside of here we can actually create an input component. So we're just going to create an input with a self-closing tag, and this input is going to be the main thing that does the messaging, as in all messaging applications. So it is going to have a value which is going to be equal to message. And we also have an onChange handler. And it is similar to the one before. We have a function which has an event. And inside of here, we can actually set the message to be equal to event.target.value. Simple as that. And with this onChange handler, we can also add a onKeyPress event, which is going to be for actually sending our messages. So it also has event. And we are simply going to check if event.key is equal to enter. So we want to send our message on the enter. Then we are going to run send message. If you remember, send message is actually our setter function for our message right here. I think this is spelled incorrectly, so it should be set message. And in here it should be set messages. And if the event.key is actually enter, we are simply going to send message. This is a function that doesn't exist yet, but we specified here that we need to create it. So this is a simple handler function. And in here we are going to pass in that event. And if the key press is not equal to enter, so if it's any other key, we are simply not going to do anything. So we're going to type null. So right now we need to create that event handler so we can check the data. We can do that simply. So our event handler, since we are in a functional component, is simply going to be a function. So const send message is going to be equal, and it is going to take an event. And in here, we'll type if message, then we are going to emit that message. So socket.emit send message. As you remember, our emit listener is right here. So it listens for send message event, and then it sends it to the whole server or the room. So right here, we have the second parameter, which is a message, and that is here, right here. And our third is our callback. We are calling callback right here. And on the callback, we are simply going to clean our message. So we're going to set message equal to an empty string. So when you send the message, our input field clears. Another thing we are going to do is call event.prevent default. Basically, if you worked with React, you know that full browser refreshes are not good. When you do a key press or a button click, it is going to refresh the whole page, and you do not want that to happen. So we are simply going to prevent that default behavior of a key press or a button. With that ready, we can finally see some data. So we are going to console.log our messages, and is there anything left to console.log? Let's see that for now. And now we can finally see some changes in the browser. So we can console log this, and on the server side, just press Command S to immediately run the server once again. So if we had any changes, inside of here, we can type something like test and join. Right now, you can see that we don't have much, but we have this simple input field right here. First, our array of messages is empty, but then we have one message, which is equal to test, welcome to the room, test, and it is sent by admin. So our data is successfully coming in, and if we try typing something like test, as you can see here, our message is being generated right here, and if we try sending it, we have 2 messages. So now our array of messages is actually filled, and the second message is actually test sent by a user called test. So our messaging is working correctly. Now we can get back to styling everything and make everything look like a chat box. First thing we are going to do now is simply add styles. So as I mentioned, these are the styles for the chat.css. I'm going to paste them in, and you can find them in the link down below. Simply paste those in, and let's actually start creating our chat box. So inside of here, we are not only going to have an input, we are going to have a lot of other components. First one is going to be the chat header. So we are simply going to call that Infobar. So Infobar, and that is going to be a specific component. We are going to create that component right now. So Infobar.js, and we need to create a specific folder called Infobar. And we are going to put that file inside and create Infobar.css. Although these files are nicely structured right now, so we have specific folders for every file, there is one important thing to mention. Take a look at this container property. So for example, it is now inside of the chat.css, which we are importing inside of here. Well, we are not at the moment, so let's do that. So import /chat.css. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is supposed to be inside of our chat, and in here we do have a container. But if you also have a container inside of this, so exactly same name property, it is going to be applied there also. So although this fixes project structure problems, it does not fix naming conventions. So there is something else that can fix that. So we need to make sure that every CSS property is named differently. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start creating our Infobar components. So it is going to be a normal React functional component. So import React from React. We are also going to import our Infobar.css, and it is going to be called Infobar, which is a single arrow function, which we export default at the end. Okay, simple as that. And in here, we are going to put some JSX. So inside of here, we are going to first have a div with a class name equal to Infobar. Inside of that, we are going to have yet another div, which is going to have a class name of left inner container. And we are going to copy this and put this outside of here, and it is going to be right inner container. So right here, inside of here, we also have an image. So image with a class name of online icon. We are going to import this icon right now, and it is going to have a source of online icon. It doesn't exist yet. We need to import it and make sure this is capital I. Okay, just like that, we need to close our image component, and we can add our h3, which is going to simply have room inside. So we need to somehow get a room name inside of here, but it needs to be dynamic. And inside of the right inner container, this should be lowercase r. And inside of here, we are going to have an anchor tag, which is going to have a href to the root route. So remember when I told you that a full refresh of a page is not good when you're dealing with React applications. But since we are dealing with query strings right here, so we are getting the data from the query string and we actually need to clean this socket off, we actually do a full page refresh right here. I do not say that it is a best practice, but it worked in this case. So when a user clicks this, it is going to leave the chat. So right here, we are going to have image. And inside of here, we are going to have a source of close icon. So basically, this is a link to a close icon that is going to simply close our chat box. And all images needs to have an all tag. It's going to be close image. And this one also, so alt is going to be equal to online image. Okay, just like that. Now this isn't going to work because we need to import our icons. I'm going to leave links to those icons down below so you can actually download it for yourself. Once you download these icons, make sure to create a new folder inside a source directory called icons, and then simply put your icons in there. As you can see right here, now we have our icons and we need to simply import them in our file. So we're going to do that by typing import, let's say close icon from // icons / close icon, and we can do the same exact thing for our online icon. Easy as that. Now we have our icons. And now we can see how can we get this room name dynamically in here. So inside of the chat.js, we indeed have a room property. So we're simply going to pass it right here. So room is equal to room. And now we can use that chat property inside of here. So we can simply type room. And that's it. Now we can simply add curly braces and room, and our room name should be displaying dynamically. With this out of the way, we can simply add our styles to the info bar. So in here we added some CSS properties, but as I mentioned, you can simply copy and paste all of the CSS file right here. So in here we have some info bar. This is basically a bar at the top of the chat box. And in here we have some containers and stuff like that. Final thing we need to do to actually see that Infobar component we just created is actually bring this on the top. And we need to also import our components. So we're going to type import infobar from //infobar, and then one more time infobar. Okay, we simply need to remove these curly brackets and add our normal parentheses since we are only returning this JSX. And we also need to add file name extensions like PNG on both of our images. After that, it should work fine. So now we finally get to look at something decent. Right now we have our chat box right here. It actually looks like a chat box, and we added right now just only this info bar right here. So inside of here we get a dynamic room name, and inside of here, if we actually click this, it actually brings us back to our login page. And if we type something like test and room 1, and if you sign in, you can actually see that it changes dynamically. The second part we need to do is actually display these messages right here and put our input right here at the bottom. So let's try first putting our input right there. So just underneath the info bar, we are going to have messages component and an input component. So since we have already created half of the input, let's just copy that and start with the input component. So input component is going to be a separate component. We are actually going to import it the same way we did our info bar. So in here, we're going to type input. And now we actually need to create that component. So if we collapse this, inside of the source and components, we're going to create a new component called input. Input is going to be stored in a specific folder called input. And we can also add our input.css file inside of there. So our input is also going to be a normal React component. So we can simply copy all of this to save some time, paste it right here, and remove this JSX right here. Inside of the infobar.css, we are going to be imported our input.css, and the name of the component is going to be our input. We are also not going to have any icons right here. So what do we need to pass into the input is the first question. So now let's first start with writing our input. So first we're going to have a form, and that form is actually going to have a class name that is equal to form. Inside of it there is going to be one input, and just below the input we are going to have a button. Okay, we can first start with our input. Input is going to have a class name that is equal to input, and just below that its type is going to be text. Placeholder is going to be equal to type a message, and all the other stuff we actually had before, because they are the most necessary for this input, we can just paste them right here. So we have value that is equal to message, an onChange handler, and onKeyPress handler. So right now, if you can see clearly, we do not have a message property in this specific component. So how are we going to actually call this message or set message or send message if these are all actually undefined? So in here you can see that we are not specifying them in any way. That means that we need to pass them as properties. So inside of here we are simply going to pass everything that we need. So we're going to say message is going to be equal to message. We are also going to have our set message setter function. Set message is going to be equal to set message. And we are also going to have send message, which is going to be equal to send message. Now we can actually make use of all of these functions and this message right here. We can simply destructure them into the props. So curly braces, message, set message, and send message. Simple as that. Now let's continue with our button. It is going to have a class name that is equal to send button, and it is going to have an onClick listener. So onClick is going to be equal to, as we learned before, we have an event, and in here we are simply going to send message. So when user clicks that message, we are going to send it. So send message, and we are going to pass in that event right here. And the button is going to be called how other than send. This is basically it. Now, if we imported that component correctly, and if we go back into our browser, we should see our input right here. As you can see, it is not styled yet. So let's just get back and paste in our files. As anytime before, you can do that into the input.css, and all the CSS properties are going to be inside of the GitHub repository for this project. Link down below once again. Okay, now if we go back, everything should be styled and it looks much nicer. So right now, if we didn't delete the console.log messages, we should see them inside of the console. I have encountered some weird errors thrown by the server, and I was trying to fix them, but all it took was just I needed to save the file of the index.js again. So just press Command S if you are dealing with any issues. And with that out of the way, if you now remove all of these warnings, we are going to fix them later, and refresh the page, you can actually see that we do get our message. And if we type in the input once again and press send, you can see that the messages are indeed being sent, and we simply need to display them. So this is our next task. We are going to create yet another component, which is going to be placed right here. It is going to be called messages. Let's create that messages component. So inside of here, we are going to import yet another component called messages, which doesn't exist yet. So component will be called messages, and we can simply output it right here. So messages. Okay, and now let's create a new folder called messages that is going to have, you guessed it, messages.js and messages.css. Once again, it is going to be a normal arrow function, so we can simply copy this, our input, because we already have some form right here, and paste it. We are not going to need this JSX, but we indeed are going to need to change our names from input to messages. Simple as that. We can remove all of these parameters. And what are we actually going to render inside of the messages? If you remember the beginning, when we installed the necessary dependencies, we installed something called React Scroll to Bottom. And it actually scrolls all the messages for us when the height of the messages gets higher than the height of the container. So we're going to utilize that component right here. So we can do that by typing import scroll to bottom from React scroll to bottom. Simple as that. And this is going to be our wrapper component for our messages. And now simply what we need to do inside of here, we need to loop through all of the messages. But we do not have access to messages right here. So what we are simply going to do is go inside of the chat.js. So what we are simply going to do is go inside of the chat.js, and we are going to utilize these messages right here by sending them as a property. So messages is going to be equal to messages. And right now we can loop through them. So curly braces, messages.map. We are going to have a message and we are going to have an index. And for each message, we are going to generate a div that is going to have a key of index, because every property in React needs to have a div. And we are going to render something else inside of this div. And our message is exactly what is going in there, but it is going to be a separate component. As you can see right here, it is also a new component that we need to create. Inside of this message, we'll provide it with some parameters. So it is going to be equal to... But we are also going to provide this message component with some parameters. So message is going to be equal to message and name is going to be equal to name. Both of these things are coming from our props. So remember, we just passed messages. This should be that messages and not capital M. And we also need to provide names. We need to pass names so we can differentiate messages sent from the current user or all the other users in the room. With that out of the way, we need to create our message component. We can do that just under the components as any other. So we can type message and we can provide it with message.js as well as message.css. Simple as that. We can also once again copy some of the previous code right here. So we save some time and we can remove the JSX and also rename messages to simply message. Simple as that. Now we need to check what parameters have we passed. We passed in a message and a name, and we can get that right here. So message and a name. Nice. So what is this message actually going to look like? We need to specify that in this file. Inside of the message, we are first going to do some logic. So we need to change this parentheses into curly braces. We are going to create a variable called isSentBy current user, and we are going to set it to false. Now, before we add an if check, we actually need to trim our name. If you remember, on the backend, we trimmed our name. We need to also do it on the front end. So we are going to create trimmed name constant, and it is going to be equal to name that trim, and then that to lower case. Simple as that. Now we can add our if check, in which we can check whether user is equal to trimmed name. If this is true, we need to render a message that is blue and that is on the right side, if that makes any sense. It is sent by the current user. So we are simply going to set this variable is sent by current user equal to true. And then we are going to render something differently based on that variable right now. So just below that, we have a return statement. So return we are going to use a ternary operator. So if it is sent by current user, question mark, then we will render something inside of here. But if it is not sent by a current user, then we will render something inside of here. So let's write that JSX right now. So first we are going to have a container. So we are going to have a div that is going to have a class name equal to message container. Just below that, we are going to add a paragraph, which is actually going to be a name of the user that is going to be beside every message. This is going to have a class name that is going to be equal to sent text. And inside of here, we are going to actually put our trimmed name, which is basically our username. Okay, just below that, we are going to have a div that is going to have a class name that is going to be equal to message box, just as that. And inside of here is the actual paragraph with the message. Its class name is equal to message text. Okay, and inside of here, we can actually render our text. If you remember, when we looked at the data, message was actually an object that had both user and text. So inside of here, we have user and text, and the text is the thing that we are looking for. So basically, the text of the message is the text inside of the message right here. Maybe a weird naming, but if you remember that the message was actually an object that has user, which is actually the sender of the message, and the text, which is actually the body of the message, then everything should be all right. And now for the messages that are not sent by the current user, we can simply copy this, but add some additional properties. So if the message is sent by the current user, we are going to add class justify end. And if it's sent by not current user, we are going to add class justify start. Also, next to the sent text, we are going to add some padding right 10 right here. And in here, we are going to add background blue. In here, we are going to have background light, simple as that. And inside of the paragraph, we are going to have color white, but color of this text is going to be color dark. For the messages that are not sent by the current user, we need to move this paragraph down because the display of the name of the person who sent that message is different. And we also do not need to use trimmed name, but because we already have the username of the current user, which is right here in the user. So we are going to put that right there. And we are going to add padding left of 10. That should be it. As any other time, go into the messages.css and paste the CSS that is available on GitHub repository. Just as that should be it for our message component. Let's check it out. Now, if we go into the browser, we can see one error. That means that inside of the messages, we haven't imported the message component. So we're going to type import message from /message/message. We can finally see how it all looks like. So right here, we can type some name like JavaScript mastery, and just down below, we can type room test. After we join, you can see that we immediately get our joining message, and we can type something like test, and you can see that our message is actually sent right here. Just one more thing, we already have the CSS inside of the single message, but we haven't added our CSS for our messages. So just feel free to add this here, copy it, or type it yourself. And another thing, you may have noticed that if you go to the browser, you go in, you get to write messages. But if you restart, and you don't even get a first welcome message from the admin. That is happening because we never actually removed our user. So we need to get back to our index.js on the backend. And where do you think that we need to remove our user? Actually right here on the disconnect function. So right here, we are just going to type const user is equal remove user, and we are going to pass in user's ID who just disconnected. And we can also be kind enough to let other users know that this user left. So we can simply type if user, and then inside of here, we can send a message. So to user.room, so that specific room, and we need to emit the message. And if you remember, we need to send the payload. Basically, admin is also sending this message, and the text of the message is template literal user.name has left. That's basically it. Now, if we go back into our browser and go to the new chat, let's see right here, try to type something like name.js mastery and room equal to test. Inside of here, you get the message. If you type test, it's here. If you refresh, you also get a new welcome message because you were added and then removed and then added once again. So that's great. Now we need to add some logic to actually see what users are inside of the room, and we can also do that on the backend right here. So with all the other emits right here, we are also going to create one more final emit, which is going to be equal to, so we are going to send it to user.room, and that emit's name is going to be room data. So inside of here, we are simply going to pass in room, which is going to be equal to user.room, and users that are inside of the room will be a get through our helper function, which is basically get users in room. And as a parameter, we need to pass the room name of the current user, and that is under user.room. Also, this curly brace should be right here and not right there. This is basically it. And just under this send message when user leaves, we can also modify the state. So when the user actually leaves, we can send a new message to room data, which is going to be equal to, we don't need user anymore, we need room, which is equal to user.room. So next to the user.room, we can also just send users because we need to know the new state of the users in the room. This is basically it. And now we can go onto the front end and actually configure the right side of the chat box where all the users in the room data is going to be. One more thing that I forgot to add was this class name inside of the messages directory. So messages.js, simply add a class name that is equal to messages. Simple as that. And now if we go back, you can see that our messages are nicely styled on top of the container right here. And now we can actually test what would happen if another person joined. So we can copy this URL, go back here, paste it, but we just need to change the name since we cannot have two people with the same name. So inside of here, we are going to type something like John. If we go inside of here, we can see that it welcomes us, but inside of the JavaScript masteries text box, we can see that we have John has joined. Now, if you type a message like hello right here, you can actually see that it is indeed being sent from John's account on the separate browser tab. Also, I mentioned that there will be emojis, so let's implement that right now. So inside of the specific message, so go inside of the message, in here we are going to make use of the React emoji library. So everything that we need to do is simply import React emoji from React emoji. That is basically it. And inside of here, we have this text right here. This text is going to include something that might be emoji. So we are simply going to type React emoji that emojify, which is a built-in method, and we are going to pass in this text as a prop. This should work all right. Also, let's fix these errors we have right here. So under the info bar right here, if we go under the component, so this is a simple warning that says that we do not need to specify that this is an image because the browser already knows it. If we go back right now, you can see that everything is indeed okay. We get some weird warnings here about using the component will receive props. Maybe some dependencies are using it, but we are not in our code. So now if we type test, you can actually see that everything works all right. And if you refresh this also, you can see that our messages are indeed being sent right here. Everything works perfectly. Now, here is the interesting part. Your job is to display the people who are actually online in one room right now. So this is going to be your task for this video. I'm just going to give you a hint. So inside of the chat.js, you will need to create a separate component that is going to be called text container. And inside of the text container, you're going to pass users. So users is going to be users. Now you have access to these users, you're simply going to need to loop through them and display them nicely. After you do that, if you did it correctly, very well for you, nice job. If you have some troubles with it, simply check the GitHub repository and feel free to copy the code. That's basically it. Our full application is done and we have everything right here. You can even leave the chat and join with some other name and troll some people. But the main problem is that you cannot send it to your friends, so you can show off or something like that. And you also cannot put it on your portfolio. These are some of the problems. Because as you can see right here, our whole application is currently on the local host. And the only thing that you can do with it is basically chat with yourself. You can join with 2 different chats and chat. So this is okay if you just want to put your code on GitHub and display it simply as code. But if you want to show off your application on your portfolio, something like that, we need to deploy it. So the next part of this video is going to be about deployment, both deployment of the server side and the client side of this application, so stay tuned. We are actually going to deploy this application on 2 different sides. So first you need to deploy the backend to the Heroku. And afterwards, you need to deploy the frontend on React to Netlify. So feel free to log in into the Heroku, I already am, and feel free to log in into the Netlify. After you log in, let's first start with Heroku. So you can create a new app right here, call it React Chat Application or something similar. And after you create it, right here, you have all the necessary instructions. So first, make sure to download the Heroku CLI. You can do it simply by clicking one of these links right here. Just download it and install it. And afterwards, you need to use the command line to actually do it. So right now, let's get back and let's start deploying it. So let's actually deploy it. There is only one small change we need to do before we start. And if you remember correctly, we actually installed something called course at the beginning of the video on the backend. And it is a cross-origin policy basically. And if you do not add it to your index.js, when you deploy it, some of your requests or sockets are going to be ignored or are not going to be accepted. So you need to add it to your index.js. We do it simply by typing const course is equal to require course, and just below that you can actually type app.use and then pass in the course and simply call it. So let's just see what course is. So course right here, Node.js, and if you check the course on npm and type here course, we can actually see that it is cross-origin resource sharing, and when you deploy the website, sometimes it restricts the resources that are being sent. And now we can continue with the installation process. So first we can actually close all of this, actually remove this, leave this and clear it, and actually close all of this. We only need terminal for this step. Okay, so right now we are inside of the server directory. We need to type Heroku login. Okay, now you need to press any key to open up the login process in the browser. You will be redirected and then you can simply log in right here. After you're logged in, you can get back right here and you can see that you are indeed logged in. Okay, the second step is to actually go into your project and initialize a Git repository. So we are going to copy it and type Git in it. The second step is to add a Heroku as a Git Remote. So we're going to do exactly that. And let's see. Yeah, this is correct. And you need to add, commit, and push everything to Heroku master. Before we start with git add, make sure to add that git ignore right here. So we're going to type that git ignore, and inside of there, just type node modules. We want to because you want to ignore the node modules. Then type git add, git commit, first commit, and then you simply type git push Heroku master. This is going to push all the files on that Heroku repository. Sometimes this isn't going to work, so always when working with Heroku, feel free to add proc file right here. So it is simply a new file that lets Heroku know that you're working with Node.js application. So enter web node index.js right here inside of that proc file, and also inside of the package.json, remove this node mon and simply type node. Once you did that, simply let's go ahead and git add, git commit. We can call it second commit, and run git push, and run git push Heroku master. This should now correctly push our files, and we should be able to open them in the browser. And now if you go under the overview right here, you can see that our build is deployed. You can go under settings, and right here is going to be the URL of your live server that is online. As you can see here, server is up and running. That is the message that we specified to let the server or the browser know that the server is running. The only thing we need to do now is to actually deploy the front end. So first, we are going to copy this URL and get back to our client side. Now we can lower this down, close these files, and go into the client, source, components, chat, and actually change this endpoint. We are not calling localhost 5000 anymore. We are actually calling this online deployed application server. So right now, when that is ready, go into the client repository, so ls, and make sure you cd into the client repository. And now we can actually close this down and see how can we deploy everything with Netlify. So when you log in into the Netlify, you will see all of your sites right here, and you will see want to deploy a new site without connecting to Git, drag and drop your site folder right here. So basically all you need to do is go into the client, press reveal in Finder, or the same thing for Mac, and simply pull and push that client folder all the way into the Netlify. It is automatically going to upload it, and you will be able to see it online. It is uploading right now. So regarding the Netlify, basically everything you need to do is install Netlify CLI globally. You can do it by typing this command into the command line, and then you'll be able to basically deploy it like we did with Heroku. Afterwards, you need to run Netlify login. So let's get back and run exactly that. So Netlify login is actually going to forward us to the browser, if I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm already logged in on this machine, and now we can run all the commands. So basically everything we need to do is run Netlify deploy. And this is going to ask us a few questions about our deployment. So what would you like to do? I would like to create and configure a new site on my team right here, and we do not need a site name. So this is the most important thing. It is asking us for a published directory right here. We want to do it from a build. So with create React app, you can create a build. So we need to get out of this console right now by typing Ctrl+C. We can clear this out. And now we can actually run a command that create React app left there for us. So if you go into the package.json, you will see under scripts npm run build. So we need to actually call npm run build. And now when the build is created, we can actually tell Netlify that we want to use this build as our site that is going to be deployed. Okay, so now building of the site is done and the new folder called build is generated right here for us. We can actually clear the console and run netlify deploy. Basically the same thing we did again, but we actually have the build folder right now. We are going to put publish directory equal to /build. Okay, and it is going to run it from that, and it is going to deploy it automatically. As you can see right here, it gave us a draft URL. If you command click on it, it will actually open it in the browser. Now we can type something like JavaScript mastery to the room learn React, and if you press sign in, you can actually see that everything works and is actually deployed to the browser. So you can actually send this link to someone and you can chat with them online. So if you see right here, we typed something like test. We can also open our new chat app with a new person. So if new person goes there and her name is Jane, learn React is the room name, and in here Jane is welcomed. She says hello, and now JavaScript Mastery received that message and everything is working as planned. You can now get back and simply run this command to put it to production. That's it. Again, type publish directory /build. And that is it. We came to an end of this video. We have a fully working chat application built with React, Node, and Socket.io, and it is actually deployed. So feel free to put it anywhere you like, or feel free to share this URL and chat with your friends. If this video was helpful, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment saying what would you want to see in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.